Hi, my name is Mark Cashman, and I am a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Microsoft with a focus on Microsoft Lists, SharePoint, and a lot of what we do for collaboration, specifically around content in Microsoft Teams. And I wanted to take a moment to share what you can do with Microsoft Lists for your next marketing campaign. I'm going to show this in the context of Contoso, but all of these capabilities are now available in production and really are intended for you to use as they are with light configuration so that you can customize things like your business process, your reminders, and when people get alerted or notified, and of course, your content. You will lean in and make it your own for the specific needs of your marketing campaign. Should I say, your next marketing campaign? To put a little context around where Microsoft Lists, Microsoft Teams, and of course the use of the Power Platform, in this instance, you're going to see a lot of the use of Power Automate, really fits within the context of a connected work management platform that is a subset of what we offer through Microsoft 365. So there are a lot of apps and ways of how these apps are integrated for a lot of different scenarios. And for a marketing campaign, a lot of what you do is internal collaboration, getting materials ready, working on timing, getting ready to amplify the message and connect with all of your outbound channels, which of course have a lot of different owners for different channels and different content components that you will create and deliver. So this is really looking at a subset of a lot of apps, but how they come together. And if you look, the quick version of this is as you start to manage your information, your tasks, your content where it lives, it really is Office 365 at the core that will offer that in addition to how you communicate across your tasks. In this instance, I'm going to show you a lot of the role that Microsoft Lists plays to track and manage your information and the people that are involved in the marketing campaign. And some of that will be how they communicate around that information within inside Microsoft Teams. Also on this is the connection that we have to a real broad ecosystem, both first party and third party. You being potentially your own third party app developer, or in this case, maybe a solution developer, in how you can enable others. And again, I will highlight one of the things that we have newly integrated with Microsoft List, which is Power Automate flows as a part of a list template when you create your list in the very beginning. But there's also a lot of potential in how you can further extend using things like Power Automate, Power BI, Power Apps, working with your own IT departments to further extend components, whether that's with the lists or part of your communication or business process, and all the while tracking as best as you can so that not only you deliver your marketing campaign on time, but people are well informed. And as things change, as they always do, status or ownership equates to that being tracked, but also how you bring other people in or notify them of those changes. So to give you just a quick 101, if you're new to Microsoft Lists, this is an application inside Microsoft 365 to help you track what matters most, your information. This is one scenario, marketing campaigns, but you can use it to track physical assets. You can use it to track employee onboarding, or you can use it to track things like issues as you're tracking issues across a team or across your whole company. And we really designed Microsoft Lists to be simple so that you can access them wherever you are. If you're working in Teams, whether you're working on the web, if you're on mobile now for Android and iOS, we have a great end user experience for how you create lists, manage information, and of course communicate with others. Sometimes that may be as a comment on a list item, or it's the way that you share out the list and collaborate with other people. It gets smart in the context of making sure that everybody stays in sync, and so we hope to add value with some of the base elements of building out rules, the now built-in Power Automate flows that are delivered through a number of the templates. Or again, if you have those quick sharing via email, share things as a link, draw people in with comments, and of course, put quick edits in line so that you're adjusting the content that may drive the who is then coming to provide more insights or coming in to edit a list item of their own. And it's all flexible because we want to give you the visual tools so that as the information changes, you're getting a story. When are things due? What is this list item? Is it something that belongs to a specific group? You can color code per group or per status. You can also bring things into Excel or Power BI to further analyze. Or if you want to build more robust applications and draw in other information from other lists or other data sources, you can do a lot of that work with Power Apps in addition to how you configure Power Automate for some of the outreach to those other services. So there's a lot that you can do to make a list your own. And again, always getting back to help you track what matters most across you as an individual, across your team, or potentially for some scenarios across your whole organization. Getting into seeing some of this truly at work, I am here on Microsoft Lists Home, which is aggregate of your favorite lists and lists that you've either recently created or were asked to be a part of to collaborate on. And just for visual sake, I'm just putting this into full mode so that we can focus a little bit more on the Microsoft List UI. The first thing I'm going to do is create a new list. And of the templates that now have a built-in Power Automate flow, one of those that I'm going to use for the marketing campaign is what we call the content scheduler. But there are a lot of different templates, and hopefully you can read ahead and see which one fits the different scenario that you're doing. And if you're building out a marketing campaign, like I will do in this video, you might want to try the content scheduler to get a quick start into things that are already configured for you. So when I click into it, you'll see that this is a list that's pre-configured with multiple columns, some choices that are already pre-populated. Of course, you can configure them, add more, remove some. You've got different content types that you're tracking, images, hyperlinks to internal or external content, and a descriptor. What is this? What type of content is this? So this is just a peek ahead at what the content scheduler brings. And then when you start to use this, and we're going to get ready for our next campaign, our Mark 9 campaign, and then I'll show you in real time a lot of the value that I've already built out in the Mark 8 campaign. So give it a title, choose a color, give it an appropriate icon. You can change these things at any time, and then choose where do you want this list to be created. Ultimately, it's SharePoint on the back end, and because I'll be showing you a more finished example in the sales and marketing site, I will put that there. But for the most part, when I'm creating it from the lists home, I stay within lists to create my list. So the first thing you're going to get prompted, this is one of those that has an automatic prompt and it adds a Power Automate flow. This one is called a reminder flow. And you can see that these features are going to get set up for me, and it's going to add a publishing date reminder flow with the default being 3 days. I can choose not to add this if I don't want it, if I just want to track information but not have a flow that runs, but I do, so I'm going to click next, and it's going to do a lot of that work for me. Used to be a number of different steps for me to even get to the point to be able to create a list, to then go into Power Automate to create a new flow and associate it to this list. And this just hopefully helps you save time. If not, do it for you so you know then you have that built-in capability, that ability to remind somebody at an automated fashion. So you can see in the upper right here that is currently working. If I click into it, you can see if you're familiar with Power Automate flows and how they work on SharePoint, this is now getting that set up for us. It is updating the Mark 9 campaign, that's the name of the list, with this particular flow, which is called a publishing date reminders flow. So that'll take a little bit to set up. I'm going to go in and show you what that flow looks like. But I first, while this is working on it, I'm just going to show you what you get with the template by default. So if we add a content title, we'll just do some simple things like this is our blog. I'm going to say that this is currently in planning. You can see that all of these choice fields are pre-populated for me based on the template. You can add or remove or adjust in however way you want. We're going to put this into the future. Everything for this launch is going to be landing around August 23rd with some activities before and after. I'm going to make this a 9 a.m. blog launch. And this will be, the draft is going to be due 2 days before. And the publish date is the 23rd at 9 a.m. And those are important, especially for that flow that will now be running against both this draft date and this publish date. This is a blog post. You can see again, pre-populated items. And if I need to, I can go in and add an element that is a graphic. And for this purpose, I'm just going to grab a fun graphic of my dog because she's going to help sell the next Mark 9. That's Peanut. And eventually we'll fill in more of this detail as we get it. Right now, this is just putting in the intent to write a blog for part of the marketing campaign. And when I click save, as you would imagine, we now have a new list item in our Mark 9 campaign. And if I want, I can favorite this list so it shows up in that favorited area. And we're pretty much done. This list is created. It now is ready to start collaborating. And if I go back to list home, you'll see here's our Mark 9 campaign. It's now up here in our favorites. But to save a little time and take the turkey out of the oven when it's been a little bit more baked and ready to roll, I'm going to go up into this list that I have already pre-created, and I'll walk you through some of the things that I used as is and some of the things that I adjusted and added to the value of how I wanted to manage this marketing campaign. So into the Mark 8 campaign, you can see first off in the grid view, I've added this element of anything that is internal, content type internal. I want to make that row appear yellow. And anything that's essentially not internal, whether it's meant to be a public video, public website update, a social media post, some help articles that eventually will be public on our documentation website, and on, anything that's meant to be public. Right here, anybody coming to this list can see. Here are the things that are not going to be published but are important that most likely will inform a lot of the public assets. So that was one choice. I color coded so that anything that was marked as internal, yellow, anything not internal, green. The other thing you can see is there's some other items that I added to adjust how I and my team wanted to refer to the status of our items. So just to show you this real quickly, if I go in into edit, you can see beyond a couple that were available to me in the template, I added a few or refined either what color they were, what they said, the actual text, and I could set some logic if I wanted people to add their own choices, or if I wanted it so that nobody could add any choices, that would be certainly an easy choice. And then on content type, you'll see that I added a lot more here too. There were only 4 to begin with, and I added 2. One of them being important was documents or messaging and positioning that was important. I wanted to make sure to label those as internal only. So those are some quick changes to color code the list, to add some elements so that I can better describe what it is. But now everything is driven by the look and feel of a list. So for this marketing campaign, and hopefully if you kind of glanced around at the content titles, you'll see a lot of the different things that we're doing to make this marketing campaign efficient, both in what we're doing, who is the owner, and the dates that it is due, and even a little visual cue on what is some of the imagery that will go along with that, which is important for the next thing I want to show you, which is a number of different views that I've baked into this list that just make it easier, maybe for different people who interact with the list. There will be a group of people that will just want to see what are the finished assets visually. What is our brand, and is that coming through strong? Or is it just an easy way for people to align with, well, what is this asset? So I went into a gallery view off of that same list. And one example is if we went into the social outreach, this is one of our hero images, which was approved, in a draft format, and might be something that we move along if that's something that gets approved by the right stakeholders. As I go through here, you can see we've got plans for how we want to update our resource center. So there's some updates coming there, a preview of the new website update when the Mark 8 launches, and on through to lots of things that from a visual cue, gallery is great for that purpose. You can also highlight what you do or don't want to show on each card, and you can minimize whether there are titles of what each thing is, or to make that a little bit smaller. So if I go into a calendar view, this is a really important one for date-driven type lists, and one that really helps for people who like to visualize. Where are we? You can see the highlighted date now is the August 19th date, and that we're planning for a launch a lot of things, as you can see, that are green because all of these are public assets. And if I click on that 4 more, plus 4 more, you can see this full launch of what is scheduled on August 23rd. We've got our Facebook post, our Twitter tweets, the launch blog, website update, product readiness, the actual product that will be available for order, social outreach, and on and on. And on any day that has multiple items, you can always see the summary here on the right. And of course, if anything was unscheduled, I would see it here, and I could then drag and drop it to schedule it. But a calendar view is something that you create. It's very easy to create a calendar view, and it adds a lot of how different people might want to interact with your list. I just want to see when are things due or when are things planning to be launched, and that you can color code it. So these are all things that are in planning or in draft, and things that are ready or intended to be available in public on the launch day. Next is really a working environment. If I wanted to go in and see what the status update is, I can see that I have one unassigned item. So keep in mind, this is where it says planned, assigned, draft needs approval. If you notice, that meets the buckets here at the top. And if I want to take this ads for the podcast platform and really make it known that it's now been assigned. So I moved it from here, and now you'll see that the metadata, that column, has been updated for the ads for podcast platform now is aligned. And just to show you visually, if I move it over to the next bucket, you'll see it change from assigned to planned, from planned to assigned, from assigned to draft needs approval, and on as you move things around. It's a really easy board canvas to be able to then track and manage status, especially when you're doing some live check-ins. It's very easy to adjust, and the content adjusts automatically for you. If you need to, at any time, you can click in to read the full information of any piece of content, any list item. Next, I'm going to show you a couple of what got created based on the actual template. So two that come with this template, the content scheduler, is something that is just a pivot on anything that's been listed as the status of published. So there's 3 items, and these are all internal, and at this point they're published, and we should feel good about that. But if I really want to get a view, if my intent is to say, hey, what is the progress on anything that's not unpublished? So status is anything but published, then I'm going to see that. I can even adjust this if I want to get a little bit more visibility. I can save that view. So for the next person, they'll have an easier time to see content description, status, and or update it and add to it as they need to. So those are things that ship within the template. I created the calendar view, I created this gallery view, and I created that status update using a board view. And just to show you real quickly, if you haven't done that, you can always go in, create a new view using the list, which is that grid view of rows and columns, calendar view, and you set it by what do you want to set up the calendar for based on the due date or the published date, or things that might be when that item was created. You can always use some of the things that are really based on the list itself. And then you can highlight what do I then want to see on the calendar as the item. And it may be that you want to pull out something other than title. You might want to have anything that's been published by a certain author or owner. So once you create your view, they're always available down in this drop down. And then when you want to, you can further refine them as you start to use the list more and more. So of course, I mentioned when we created this list, a flow was automatically created for me. And you can go into the Integrate menu, you can go into Power Automate, and after you use the template, you can go in and see your flows. And so we'll look at the one that's associated to this particular list. And you can see it's called the Publishing Date Reminders. That's the one that was just created 9 minutes ago. And the one that I'm actually using on the more baked list, I adjusted a little bit to call it the draft and publishing date reminders. But let me go into this one that was just created so you can see what it looks like fresh out of the box. You get the details here about what it does. 3 days before the draft date or the published date is due, this flow is going to run, and the author, the person who's listed as the author in the author column, will get a reminder. So if I want to edit this, I can go into edit mode. If you're familiar with Power Automate Designer, this is the Power Automate Designer for this particular flow. And again, I didn't configure any of this except for I changed one thing on the one that is currently running on our actual production list, and that is how many days before the due date of either the draft or the published content do I want to adjust. And what I did in the other one was I changed it from 3 to 7. In this instance, I'm going to change it from 3 to 6 just so you can see that delta. And then you can see what this is doing. This is actually going to go in, and for any draft item due in X days, that's 6 is the X, send a reminder email. For anything that based on the published date is 6 days away, I can do that. And if there's anything that you want to change for drafts in 5 days and publishing in 3 days, you can do that to your heart's content. These run independently based on those two separate columns of each list item. So again, this flow got created. If I did nothing, it would do it by default 3 days in advance of the draft date and the publishing date. But if I change it to 6, save it, and then it'll tell me when it's ready and available for that next thing. Your flow is ready to go. Um, and just so you can see, if you want to edit it for people in the future, the little change that I did is I did it from 6 to 3. So in the description, make sure you change that as well. So when people come to use this, if they're wanting to check the flow, they can. And I can see that this is already run to success. If I go back to my flows and I show you the one that I've been using, you can see that it's been running for a while, succeeded pretty much a few days, every few days, and that it really just takes only a real brief time for it to run and then send that information. And just to switch over, so hopefully it's really obvious, what it's doing is when that flow runs, anything that is based on this draft due date, so on August 1st, 6 days in advance, it'll send a reminder to the person that owns this. And so that owner column would be the trigger of this. So let me go to all items, and you can see here we have in the owner column. So let's say we went and these are a little bit later in the calendar. So if this is 3 days from now, it would trigger 6 days ahead to send a note to Nestor. Nestor would get a nice reminder with a link to this item, and he can then take action, or if anything, just be reminded and go from there. So last thing I want to show you is what does this all look like in the context of collaboration? There's two instances that I want to show you. This is that same list, the final one that I was showing you for the Mark 8 launch. This is that same Mark 8 marketing campaign launch list. And you can see hopefully it looks exactly the same. All the things that are adjusted and running in here, if I expand it, I can see the full list. I can even switch the different views if I want to see it a little bit more in gallery view. If I want to work on that status update and do a little bit of the dragging and dropping, you see that supported as well, and the metadata changes just fine. And anytime I can go out of the full mode and continue to work in whatever works best for me. I'm going to go into the unpublished and go maybe based on this status. I'm going to filter by draft needs approval so that I can whittle it down to these 4 items. And on this particular one, I'm going to click into it and I'm going to reach out to the owner. The owner is Nestor, and I'm just going to chat with him in a conversation. So let us say at Nestor, will you be ready for a review in a few days with our leadership? Send that down. And even though this list is connected to the sales and marketing team by default, this conversation would be private to just those people that are a part of this Mark 8 launch channel, which is within the sales and marketing team. And just to show you what it looks like, that same post, here it is to Nestor. He would have gotten a notification in his activity feed. Will you be ready for the review? And if he clicks on it, same as I'm going to do right now, when you click on it from within Teams, it takes you right to the list item. Here it is, with the context of what I asked him in the conversation and anything that I may have asked him to do, which is just to review this. Is it ready? And if it is, let's say it's been now moved to planned. And that in of itself may have something that it would have triggered. So that's what it looks like for the list in Teams. And again, you have full access to work on and manage, and then of course collaborate on any item or all items. And I also want to show you what it's like within the context of SharePoint. This is technically where the list is stored. Just to show you, if you're interested, you can always go into Site Contents. Here's the Mark 7 campaign, Mark 8 campaign. That's our main one. And this is the one that I just created at the very beginning of this video. But I can see that this is stored inside of this SharePoint site, Sales and Marketing. If I click into it, I can actually access the list. But what I've done is if I go to the home page, I use the list web part using the calendar view to actually embed it in my little mini dashboard here for the sales and marketing team on our SharePoint site. And again, if I want to, I can change and view the different look and feel to navigate and pivot on how I visualize this list. So with all of that context, the very last thing is as you start to build out, if your needs are met with what you do and have with the default out-of-box template, the flow that gets associated, you can do some simple things with what we have in the Microsoft List products, which we call rules. And I'll just show you a few rules that I created that I think support what it is people do leveraging lists with a marketing campaign. So if an item is approved to be true, which means it's ready to roll, let's send an email to Isaiah. When a new item is added to this list, I want to send it to the owner of this list, and I just happen to be logged in as the MOD administrator. So that would send a note to me. But where it gets interesting is this type of rule. When I click into it, it kind of looks like you're writing a sentence. When the status, which is this column here, it's kind of hidden by the rule itself, but that column where it says the status, if the status is equal to ready to publish, or you choose how you want to build out the rule, but of course ready to publish probably triggers for some review. I want to send an email to the owner being who is listed in this column. So it's really nice that it has the smarts to check the list item itself and send an email, in this case the one that we can see down here. If we switch this to ready to be published, it's going to send a reminder to Alex. So with that rule running and with that logic, if I go in here and I do ads for the needs is ready to publish, the second that it saves, right now an email has been delivered to Alex with a link to this list item notifying him that it's ready to publish. And whatever action he may take that's a part of your business process, you certainly would have that be a great trigger based on that status change, but automated to make sure that Alex is notified of that action. And that's it. I hope you've seen the way that you can use lists across a lot of different content types to really track the status, the information, the ownership, and of course the date and times for delivery so that you can have a great work back schedule, you can have a really great experience, people collaborating together, and that you can do all of that within the context of where a lot of people are working these days within Microsoft 365 or even more poignant within Microsoft Teams.